to welcome everybody to today's webinar. My name is Zahra Clark and I head up the MENA region for Tiger Recruitment. Today's topic we're covering is women in leadership in the MENA region. Throughout today's webinar, you will be able to ask any questions you have and we will try and answer them at the end of today's webinar. However, if we are unable to answer your questions today, please send us an email at tiger-recruitment.co.uk and we will have them answered for you. So to start this webinar, I'd like to introduce these three lovely ladies who are joining me today. So first of all is Bibi Sheikh, who is an executive coach, founder and managing director at Coach Results. Bibi has over 20 years professional HR experience. A key part of Bibi's work now involves supporting women in business and encouraging them into the board positions through leadership development and programs focusing on well-being, returning to work and addressing gender balance. So Bibi, I'd like to welcome you today to today's call.
Thanks very much, Zara.
Next up is Suzannah Newboult, who is a partner, board member at DLA Piper. Suzannah is on the global board of DLA Piper and is one of the world's largest law firms. She is a working partner in the firm and is on the steering committee for its gender balance network and sponsors in its D&I sponsorship program. She is also on the market advisory board of RICS. Welcome to today's call, Suzannah.
Thank you.
And finally, Simona Agolini, who is CEO and co-founder of Kids. With a background in marketing and business development, joint ventures, mergers and acquisitions, Simona co-founded Kids in 2017. She is a passionate advocate for women and provides them with opportunities to grow, be successful through providing mentoring, sponsorship and leadership support. So welcome to the call today, Simona.
Hi, good afternoon.
So first of all, we'd like to discuss the state of play. So Bibi, I'll start with you. What changes have you seen over the years in the Middle East regarding women in leadership roles?
So I think there's been a huge amount of change, Zara, especially in the last decade. And when we look at it in the context of the fact that we're an emerging market, the rate of adoption has actually been quite significant. So culturally, there have been traditions that have seen leadership or growth within women in the workplace could have been seen as quite restrictive. And that was things like, solo travel wasn't necessarily allowed in Saudi, segregated offices. And if you look at the region as a whole, so Saudi is actually recently with their vision of 2030, they've made a lot of legal changes recently. And some of those are around, women can drive, women can have solo travel. Their segregation in the workplace has come down. So all these potential barriers have actually moved away. The UAE has also recently mandated that for every listed company in the UAE, they should have at least one female board member, which is absolutely fantastic, which has given rise to social enterprises like Aurora 50, who are now sponsoring and coaching, developing females who are potential pipeline for board members, but also just giving them an insight into what it might be like to be a board member. So giving them access, giving them aspirations, giving them mentors. So I think there's a lot of change that's happened in the last decade. And I think the adoption, as I said, has been really, really quite fast paced, given that we are an emerging market, to the point where actually we're probably on par now with sort of, the worldscape around how do we develop leaders, sort of female leaders within the business scape to get to that lean in percentage of, ideally 30%.
Yes, absolutely. And Suzannah, in your experience, what would you say are the main barriers that exist to women to progress within a company?
Well, I think there are two particular barriers that certainly relate to professional services firms. The first is that often in a lot of professions, there aren't that many women already in the top leadership positions, which means as women progress up through their career, as they get close to the top, they become a minority. And unfortunately, being a minority can still be quite difficult. And it's not unusual, I think, for us to see people that get into that position that then start to find they're not speaking up as often, or even start to lose confidence when they're, the only female at the table. And so that then becomes self-limiting, and that in itself becomes a barrier to that person's further progression. And the second thing that I also see a lot in professional services firms is that those traits that get you through your career progression to the place so you're just below the top are then sometimes those traits that stop you going that last step in your career progression. So imagine somebody who progresses very quickly, rapidly rises through the ranks. They're probably ambitious, they're confident, they're addressing issues when they arise, they're proactive in what they do, and they do that, and it's praised by the people in those senior leadership positions, and they're rewarded. They get their career progression. Get to that stage just below the top, and then those traits, those behaviours start to actually be relevant to the people at the top, the people that have been encouraging them through that process. And so suddenly then those traits could become a little bit unsettling to perhaps those people at the top, and maybe even threatening. So at that stage, there's sometimes a shift, and you start hearing those traits described as over-ambitious. That person's direct, that person's uncollaborative. And then those very traits that have been praised to that point can be then switched and used perhaps to stop or slow that last step of the progression. So just two things there I throw out there as things that we see in the professional services arena.
Perfect. Thank you, Suzannah. And Simona, what challenges have the women around you faced when they've wanted to move into leadership roles?
I think for me, when I look at women in leadership, what I see as a sort of a critical turning point in a woman's life is when she actually chooses to have kids. And I think I think when you don't have kids, or you're pursuing a different life plan, I don't see that there are that many challenges that face women. And maybe the points that Suzannah just made about, at the end where it kind of plays against you, that might come into play. But where I've seen in my career and my own personal experience is that when challenges come in for me in terms of pursuing a more ambitious role, is very much related to balancing demands between the what you have to do on your personal life and what you have to do in your professional life. And in particular, I think it's also related to a lot of international travel. Maybe COVID will have actually been a bit of a silver lining for people, which in a very strange way, in that we do Zoom webinars, and we do so many more meetings nowadays. So I think as a parent, that actually helps you pursue a career if you don't actually have to jump on a plane every other day to travel halfway around the world. So I think, for me, it really is that balance that that has made it challenging to come back into the workforce after having had kids, rather than anything else. I think that the ambition, I don't believe that there's a difference between ambition between women and men. I believe that companies need to really champion it, really encourage women to apply for roles that are maybe more out there, and that are roles that, there's a statistic that says that, that you apply, and you probably know this the best, that, you put out a job description, a job opening, and you'll get very few women who will apply to it, because they probably don't tick 80% or they tick 80% of the qualities, but not 100. And men who tick 20% will apply for it. So I think it's about encouraging women to take some roles that they might not naturally have thought were appropriate roles for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's true on the statistics. We do seem to get a higher level of men applying for positions than we do women. And also I think that it comes to a stage where people sort of lack that confidence to think, actually, I can do that and I can grow within that position. So I totally agree with that point.
And actually, I think, sorry. Zahra, a point is that generally speaking, men are recruited based on potential, and women are recruited based on experience. So women already have to prove their capability to actually do a job, and that's around unconscious bias, and I'm sure we'll touch upon that this afternoon at some point. But the way that we recruit, our processes also need to be looked at in terms of, you know, women have already got that barrier to come across, and so therefore that will knock their confidence, because they kind of think, well, I've done that a few times before and I didn't get that job. But it's actually, you know, as Simona pointed out, giving women that opportunity to actually have the confidence to say, I can do that, or I will be able to do that, and having the confidence to be able to apply.
Yeah, and it's and also applying for roles that are going to stretch them as well, rather than just staying within their comfort zone. I think that's also very significant. So our next topic is challenges firms face. So Bibi, again, what are the challenges that organisations face regarding the increase in number of female leaders?
So I think the challenges are quite complex, and I think they're multiple. And it depends in terms of the organisation that you're actually dealing with. I mean, I think we recognise that there's enough data now to support the argument that a more diverse leadership, either from a gender perspective or, you know, cultural perspective as well, creates stronger and above average results. So I think everyone accepts that. Yet organisations, whilst they're recognising those benefits and the ambitions, there are challenges in accomplishing them. And I think even before COVID, you know, COVID has kind of exacerbated the female leadership development. So all the progress that had been made in the last few years has kind of gone a little bit backward. But I think starting with the mindset and the awareness of the benefits of gender balance, of having an increased number of female leaders, that in itself is around an education process, being aware. I mean, it's stated that 80% of the challenges that are faced within D&I, and Suzannah, from your experience, you might be able to confirm this, but about 80% would be able to be overcome if we could just change mindsets, if we could genuinely get top management to believe it, role model it, and then what happens? It gets ingrained and integrated into the culture and the behaviours. So actually, it's people supporting without actually realise they're even supporting this. And having that mindset and that awareness is, I think, the first step. But then organisations, when we look at companies, you know, they were created by men for men, and so systemically, those processes support, you know, and I'm talking about historical organisation, you know, the organisation of old, not new world of work, but you know, processes, policies, things just support the development of men rather than women. So when we look at our competencies, we look at, you know, the leadership skills that a woman might be different from a man. Now, Simona mentioned that ambitions are probably exactly the same, but how are we supporting the development of these women through that? So in terms of the challenges, I would say organisational awareness, integration of behaviours to support female leadership, looking at the system, looking at the organisational structure and the processes that we actually have, and then actually taking action. Action's so important. We can talk until we're blue in the face about, yeah, that would be great, yes, we need to do this, but unless we actually start putting things into place that actually deal with this, so our processes, you know, performance management, recruitment, etc., then we won't be able to change anything. And you know, there is that underlying unconscious bias, and we've all got it. You know, it's mentally ingrained within us that actually we prefer the sound of a male voice rather than a female voice. We're more engaged in listening to a deep timbre than we are a female, traditionally female alto. So all of these things we can't necessarily automatically combat, but the awareness of them will make us stop and think, oh, actually, you know, is it my unconscious bias that's in play here? So all of that awareness is actually really, really important. And, you know, if we look at how, you know, the old boy network, if you've got top leadership that's all male, the likelihood is that when people go through recruitment, unless they're aware of these biases, will just recruit people like themselves. We all do it. We've all done it, you know, and, you know, it is there. So if it's an all male leadership, then the likelihood is they're going to be having that conversation with another male. So it's about challenging, really, really challenging those structures that are in place, and starting from the top down, being able to deal with that, I think.
That's a really great point there, Bibi. Suzannah, what kind of considerations do firms have to think about to ensure women feel included in their business development activities?
This is picking up on, I suppose, one sort of area or one practical example, if you like, of what Bibi's just described as having to think about the whole firm structures and processes. So when we think about business development, we're often thinking about actually quite historic methods of business development. And I think that firms need to be careful about how they portray what's expected. So it's very easy for us to fall back into, well, business development about taking your clients and contacts to dinner or taking them out for drinks or something like that. Whereas actually, that can create issues and can be difficult for women. And as picking up on sort of Simona's comments about it being very difficult when you've got children, well, an expectation that you take clients out for dinner or for drinks in the evening might be unrealistic and, you know, or impossible for a woman that has a couple of young children at home and needs to get home in the evening. And a second aspect of it, which I think is thought of perhaps slightly less, is that quite what you're asking a woman, and often asking young women to do, it can be the case that for a woman that is asking a client, particularly in a male-dominated industry, to dinner or for drinks, ends up giving unwanted messages, or there's an unintended interpretation of that. And often I think that's not thought about when people just sort of look and say, well, you know, you just need to be taking them out to dinner, you need to be going out for more drinks, that sort of approach to life, or even the golf club, you know, similar issues arise. But firms can deal with this, and I think what firms should be doing is being a bit more thoughtful about it, but also thinking about providing training on business development in different ways, and also role modeling. So actually the leadership in firms spending time doing business development in much more diverse ways, you know, many different ways, so that the expectation then isn't that BD is just the old-fashioned golf, drinks, dinner. And actually, there's a huge benefit for firms in that as well, because they'll find along the way that opens up their business development to a range of different people in client organizations as well, because the same effects, you know, the same issues arise for the women in our client organizations too. So it's a win-win for everybody, really.
And Simona, one of the challenges businesses face in encouraging female leadership is retaining women after they've had children. What support should companies provide to encourage women back to work?
I think that there's quite a few things on that one. So I'll start off with the obvious one, and then I'll come back to the one that I think is actually probably as important, which is I think that providing flexible working arrangements is a really, really important component. Well, first of all, it starts with maternity care, I think, or maternity leave. You know, as a mother of a new child, you need a bit of time to, you know, bond with your child and get your mind back ready to come back to work. So I think you need to have reasonable maternity care. I know that that's a cost to a company, but ultimately, if we go back to the whole premise of this conversation, having women in leadership positions actually drives better business results. I think you need to cater for that. And then I think flexible working arrangements, so allowing people to work remotely, allowing people to work at sort of the hours maybe that suits their schedule. And I know that, again, depending on the type of role you have, there are some very fixed term hours that you have to work. So for example, if you're working on customer service, you know, you need to be there from 9 to 5. But if we're talking about women in leadership roles, then we're probably talking about women who don't have a necessarily time-bound day-to-day role, in which case, you know, does it really matter if the job gets done at 10 o'clock at night when the kids are in bed, or at 4 o'clock in the afternoon? You know, I would definitely you know, debate or say that I don't think it does matter. And I worked for a company that fundamentally believed that, i.e. I was allowed to work around my hours. I think another concept that is, again, difficult to develop, but I definitely think is feasible, is part-time work or work sharing. It's a really complex, I was leading a very, very, very complex project in a very challenging country. And we were trying to figure out how to do a work sharing role. And I think it was feasible. I mean, there's some things you can't carve out, but I do think that there are parts of it that you could actually carve out that job and do it differently. I think that, you know, something that I know that McKinsey used to do, and I always thought it was a brilliant idea, is that after some of their senior female leaders have been out of work for a period of time, because I think McKinsey was actually very flexible in terms of maternity leave and unpaid leave, is that they would actually have a training that would, you know, catch the women back up to what had sort of gone on in the industry in the period of time that they were out, so that when you came back in, you weren't coming from a position of, oh my goodness, so many things have changed, but you come back from a position of empowerment saying, hey, I'm ready now to be back at work, I'm ready to give it my all, and I've got all the tools tools to do what I need to do. And then the last point, which is where I said was sort of the less obvious one, but I think is so fundamentally important, is that I think it has to be acceptable for men to have flexible working arrangements, and for men to be able to take time off as well. Because until we solve that particular problem, I think that we can talk as much as we want about how we will encourage women to come back to work. But you basically, if men aren't able to look after the kids at home and do things and take responsibility and sharing that part of the life, it's impossible for a woman to do it on her own.
Bibi, did you want to comment on that?
No, I couldn't agree more. You know, and I know the seminar is around, you know, female leadership, but without male allyship, which I'm coining a phrase from, I think it's JP Morgan. They actually run a program that is around having male allies within the business, you know, from grassroots all the way up to the leaders. And it's just about supporting the women, but also exposing all the same policies, the benefits to men and women, because all circumstances, you know, if a parent is a parent, you know, it's not necessarily just about a woman. It's just traditionally, and more often than not, it will be the mother that is the caregiver in terms of that relationship. So that's why it's come to the fore. But I couldn't agree more with Simona. Until we actually allow the father to have the same opportunity to do the same, the woman or the mother, you know, is never going to have the opportunity to actually take that reprieve, as it were, and be able to develop their career opportunities as well. So yeah, no, I completely agree there. I think it's fantastic.
Okay, moving on to positive initiatives. Bibi, what elements should firms consider in facilitating a pipeline of female leaders?
First and foremost, be excited. I mean, this is about change. We've got the opportunity to, you know, really sort of ramp up on the data that we've got at the moment, the drive that we've got, the support that we're getting, and that just whole impetus, you know, just get excited about it. But I think what's really important is actually to take a step back and just think about, you know, what is the culture that we're in, you know, for your own organization, what's the culture that we're in, what's the strategic direction, what are the behaviors within the organization, and then really be intentional in terms of the purpose. You know, what are we trying to achieve? You know, is it up there, or, you know, are we actually just going to chunk this down and do step by step and work out what we actually want? So I think have a plan, have a vision, but understand the environment that you're in, because if you don't understand the environment and you just go gung-ho, you know, sometimes you're just going to get knocked back, and it's not going to necessarily work. So getting the support from the top, and that's around conversations, it's around education, but really, does your leadership have the empathy around the nature and the nuances of D&I? And if they don't understand gender balance or the benefits of it, you know, that's your starting point. You know, create that awareness, create that education process, and then get the behaviors integrated. So it's kind of like a domino effect, you know, and then before you know it, you've got everyone talking about, and, you know, people always want to know what's going on the other side. So, you know, they're looking above the parapet and going, oh, well, you know, you've got male allyship over there, or you've got a women's network over here. So I think there's so many things that you can do, but it has to be bought into, otherwise we will face resistance. And without having the awareness, it's going to be hard to enact any of the changes that you want to see. So I think that from a behavioural cultural environment position, but also, again, you know, what are the HR and L&D strategies, and are they actually supporting female development, or are they not actually allowing? You know, so what's your training program? Do you have you know, specific leadership development programs? Do you have the opportunity where females can buddy up with someone more senior, female or male, a mentor scheme, anything like that? But their actual training programs, how does it facilitate leadership development for a woman?
Thank you. Simona, how important are mentorships for women looking to become leaders, and how can businesses facilitate these opportunities?
I think mentorships are important for everyone, sort of regardless of whether you're female or male. I think that there are multiple ways that mentorships work. I've got multiple mentors. It's people that you meet over the course of your career or your life, people that you connect with, people whose opinions you respect. And I think you can create your own circle of mentors without a company necessarily promoting it. And I always encourage any of the people that I coach to find someone that they trust, and someone that, you know, can bring a different perspective and has a neutral perspective to whatever challenges or problems you're facing. In terms of how companies can promote it, I think companies can set up mentorship programs where they select and they identify people who want to be mentors. And I think it can be at every level of the organization. I don't think it has to be at the senior level, but I think what is useful to get a lot out of the mentorship as a mentee is that the relationship you have is with someone who's got a different experience, and I would say is a bit more senior than you, because then they will have faced different issues as they go along. And I think that so a company can ask for people who are interested in being mentors. They can also provide a training for those mentors, and that comes back to the point that Suzannah, you were also making, about the dinners or the lunch, the dinners. That's actually a problem. I worked for a very male-dominated company for many, many years, and there were a lot of dinners. And if I ever got invited out for dinner on my own, with one other person, I tended to usually suggest a lunch instead, as a very easy way to deflect it. But again, by providing training to mentors, they can then impart, and they can know what the boundaries and the rules are of mentorship, and then they can have very fruitful conversations with their mentees. And you can also ask people to put up their hands who would like mentors, and therefore it's a relatively easy matching process to actually get people to find mentors and mentees. I think it's a very useful outlet and a very useful support.
Okay, thank you. Suzannah, can you tell us more about the Gender Balance Network at DLA Piper and what the goals you have and hope to achieve?
Yeah, so our gender balance network is aimed at achieving gender balance in the firm, which is to meet the wider purpose of the firm, which is just to make business better. And our network centres its activity around three things, three C's actually. So the first is connecting with clients on issues around gender balance. The second is creating clarity about career progression for our female lawyers. And the third part is about changing perceptions. And that's something that we aim to do internally and externally as well. And that can include things like changing behaviours, changing language, changing or raising awareness for things like unconscious biases, Bibi was mentioning as well. So that's the way we approach our gender balance network. The goals we have are centred on the women in the partnership. And the reason for that is, much like every other law firm, we don't have a problem with getting women into the business. We've got more than 50% of our trainees typically are female, and are newly qualified. But as you progress up the business, that number starts to diminish. So by the time you get to the partnership, we have, and this is, as I said, typical of an international law firm, we have 21% of the partnership that's female. I should add that's our international number, not our Middle East number. Our Middle East number sits at 7% female partners. So anyway, the goals concentrate on bringing balance into the partnership. So bearing in mind our starting point internationally at 21%, we're seeking to achieve 30% by 2025 and nearly doubling it to 40% by 2030. Which is a considerable ask, particularly when, I might add, when I started as a trainee, over 50% of us were female then, and it hasn't changed dramatically at partnership level yet. So there are goals. Now, we chose the word, we thought very carefully about this and chose to have goals deliberately, as opposed to quotas, because we wanted to avoid the connotations there of having positive discrimination, and it needs to be more than that. And we avoided targets because they're seen as something aspirational that might be missed. So we were very purposeful when we chose goals as being the expression of our approach to achieving gender balance. And I think those goals are super important. They need to be there to ensure that people do take tangible action towards them. And there's something that people are accountable for. So I think that any organisation needs to have goals to ensure that, you know, action is taken.
Okay, thank you. And Bibi, you regularly work with businesses to help them improve their gender balance with leadership positions, networks and mentorships aside. What other initiatives have proven to be successful?
So I think, as Suzannah just mentioned there, by looking at the data, you can recognise that, yes, when we start, you know, the career bands, you've got that 50-50 gender split, and as we get higher and higher, that kind of gets depleted. And it's about understanding the reasons for that, and you're really getting underneath the data around, you know, why are we losing, for example, in a law firm, you know, 5 or 6 year post-qualified experienced lawyers, from the female side of things, just kind of dwindle away. And so therefore, if you've got, a really small percentage there, then you're less likely, for them to grow into the top of the pyramid, as it were. So really understanding the data, and that's around exit interviews, it's around return to work programs, it's around coaching people who've been on maternity leave, as Simona mentioned, what kind of programs can organisations put in place to bring back the confidence of someone who might have been off for between 1 and 4 or 5 years, for example. So, that might not be in one full stretch, or it might have been. So I work with a few clients that actually have programs like that, and they're so welcomed because it just rebuilds confidence. As Simona, I think Suzannah said, what's gone on during that, or in that organisation over that time, so they're not kind of going, oh my gosh, all of this has changed. So that education process and that reintegration into the office is actually really, really important. So that in itself will bring people back to work if they know that they've got that support. And then things like exposing women to broader projects as well, so stretch projects, as you mentioned. How do we give women the confidence to actually speak up and say, actually, I want to be able to do that, and give me something that's going to broaden my experience, broaden my exposure, broaden my network. Because actually within an organisation, your stakeholder centre is actually so important, because people will champion you, people will recognise who you are, people will say, oh yeah, no, did a good job, and actually I can't stress more, you've got to deliver, you've got to have the credibility in order to build that trust. And the trust then can come with other things like the flexible working. If an organisation doesn't have trust with their employees, that whole flexible working is going to be brushed aside. And we've seen that in COVID. The organisations that have really thrived through COVID are ones that have got high levels of trust, because they're not thinking, well, what's that person doing? Are they actually working, or are they on their sofa watching TV? The high levels of trust organisations where leaders have been, connecting with their employees and have allowed people to log on and log off wherever they want within the parameters of their own working day. So long as they're delivering and they're building that credibility, I think it's really, really important. So I think that in terms of what we can do, in terms of women to support ourselves, but also in terms of processes that HR and the organisation can kind of put into place, are things like, women supporting women, the male allyship that I mentioned previously. What are your attraction strategies? What's your brand? Are you renowned to have strong female leadership? Because that in itself is going to attract females into your organisation. Or is that again something that just needs to be looked at? So encouraging women to support women developing, but also having that external facing and that brand through attraction strategies, through recruitment processes, through the retention analysis of the data. I think all of these little things it's like a jigsaw puzzle, all of these little things come together, and actually that in itself will create the talent pipeline, it will create the gender balance. But the want has got to be there. The organisation has to have, as Suzannah mentioned, the goals and actually a plan to enact it. Absolutely. But it's exciting. I love doing what I'm doing, and you do see people, take stock of what they hear and all of the opportunities that they can have. And the challenges do come with that quota in terms of, well, is that woman only there because there's a quota of 1% or there's a quota of 30%? Well, actually, it should speak for itself. If that woman is in that position and delivering exactly what they should and more, then actually that's where the trust around that quota comes from, because it's just, all it's doing is opening up opportunities for women to be able to prove themselves a lot easier.
I quite like Simona's comment as well regarding the remote working and having that flexibility, that it doesn't matter what time you achieve your goals of finishing your work, as long as it's done, what does it matter? Like, I really like how open that point was as well, as long as you're getting the work completed, whether it's at 9 a.m. or 10 p.m, if it's within that day and it's done, I mean, that's great again for women who've got busy schedules and need to work around, I don't know, schooling trips, etc. So the last and final subject is factors to success. Now, Simona, company culture is a key factor to women succeeding in the workplace. What changes can a firm make to their company culture to ensure women feel included?
I mean, we've touched on quite a few of them. I definitely think the role modeling and making sure that you do have those women in those roles, I think that that's a really important one. I think the trainings, that everyone is familiar with some of the challenges that maybe women face. But I think a more subtle one, but it links back to the training, is the inclusion point, because some of the women that I've mentored tend to be more soft-spoken. Highly capable, highly competent, but soft-spoken. And I've been in many meetings, and as I mentioned, I worked for a very male-dominated organization with a lot of very strong voices in the room. And what you would often see is that those voices would not be heard, despite trying to speak up. They just wouldn't be heard. And I think that a company conscious of that, maybe that component of females, and I'm not saying all females like that, because I'm not. I can speak up very loudly and I can make sure that people can hear me, but creating the space for that other voice to be brought into the room. It doesn't necessarily have to be only women. I would advocate again that some men are soft-spoken as well. So it's actually having the culture in the room that says every voice in that room is meant to be there and every person in that room should be heard, and making sure that you give people the opportunity, I think would be a very simple way of already creating a more inclusive culture and getting more of those voices out there so they could be heard and they get the exposure and they get recognized for their contribution and ideas.
Okay, great. Suzannah, how should firms encourage their employees to speak up when they see discrimination towards women in the workplace?
I think for a start, you need to have, and this comes to the culture point, you need to have very clear values, and it needs to be clear to everybody in the organisation what is acceptable behaviour and what is not acceptable behaviour.
Yeah.
And I think that has to be there as the starting point. But then in terms of making sure it actually happens, it's trite, but I think it's true to say that it needs to be led from the top.
Yeah.
And so that support there needs to be from the top, so that the person at the bottom, if you like, knows they will be supported. So my associates, senior associates, they need to know and be confident that if they speak out against something, that I will support them in that. And equally, I need to know and be confident that if I do that, then my boss will support me, and that his boss will support him, and all the way to the top. So I truly believe that it really does need to be led from the top. But it needs to be, that confidence, and Bibi talked again about trust in organisations. That confidence, that trust needs to be there at every level, and that clear underpinning of that with the message of what is and isn't acceptable, so everybody understands it.
Bibi, from working with female leaders in a coaching capacity, what have you seen to be the key factors in their success?
Their desire to grow, their desire to achieve is sort of the foundation of it all. But I think their growth in confidence, it's kind of like a domino effect. Their growth in confidence allows them to speak up. By speaking up, you're heard. By being heard, you can actually put things into action. Once you can actually act and deliver, then your credibility grows as well. Once your credibility grows, people trust you more. Once they trust you more, you're exposed to more work, and it's just a virtuous circle. So actually, I think yeah, the clients that I've worked with, you know, amaze me in terms of that cycle, that pattern, and it's so great to see. It's so rewarding for both them and me, that they can actually have that cycle. And yeah, we face setbacks, we face hiccups, but that's where, by reaching out to someone in that, you know, female network, or a mentor or a coach, or somebody that you know that may have been through that, that in itself is a growth opportunity, because we all have faced setbacks. You know, there is somebody out there who's probably gone through what you're going through, and actually by reaching out, it will allow you to feel less singular, less you know, solitary in terms of actually dealing with it. So I do think that people have the ability to have their own growth, but it's helped so much by the network that they have got. And you know, some of my clients have come back and said one of the, you know, the things that has really helped them is actually having the confidence to say no. Because as a woman also, a lot of my clients have just felt, well, if I say no, does that go against me? Or, well, you know, I've asked for all this responsibility, or I want to be promoted, how can I then be seen to be saying no? But then that struggles on their balance in terms of being able to fit it all in, being a mother, being a, you know, a spouse, being a single person, you know, with you know, other aspects and activities in their life. So how do they actually balance that? So having the ability to say no is probably quite key as well. And then, you know, reaching out to HR for that support, or through the network for the support as well. But sometimes even our own behaviours, our own thoughts, beliefs, you know, we challenge ourselves. You know, just be aware of, you know, our self-talk, which can be quite negative. You know, it should be empowering for us, not sort of, you know, limiting. And then our own self-worth, you know, we've got to have the belief that we deserve to be in that leadership position, because if we don't believe it, no one else is going to believe it. So I do think that, you know, it's got to come from within as well as within your environment and your network. Yeah. It's absolutely possible. It's possible. It's brilliant.
I love that last point. That's so true. And sort of final thoughts. What is the number one piece of advice for a firm looking to increase the number of women in a leadership position? Simona, if you could give me your take on this to start with.
One piece of advice looking to attract more women. I definitely think having females as a visible part of a leadership will help that. So I think it goes back to what Suzannah said, though, at the entry level, you know, it is 50-50, at least in the industry that I was working in. So that's not where the problem really occurs. But I think having flexible policies, I think that would go a very long way to making it an attractive work environment.
Okay. And Suzannah?
I think to increase the number of women in leadership, firms need to actively seek out the female talent that they believe has the potential for leadership. Identify those people early, and then support them, sponsor them through the process. And the reason I think it's really important is because I think you need that for those women to be able to visualize and to feel that leadership positions are accessible for them.
Could I maybe just add to that, because actually I'm going to give my own personal anecdote on that one. I got identified for a role actively by the company, and I really did not think that I would fulfill the requirements. And I got told, we will support you and make sure that you do not fail. And I did not fail, and I hardly used the support, but it was that support, that comment, that actually gave me the confidence to do it. So I really agree with that comment, Suzannah.
Yeah. I actually have a personal experience behind it as well. So I sit on the global board of DLA Piper. And one of the first people I mentioned that I was running for election to said to me, "Can you do that?" You know, isn't that for old people? You know, people that are far more senior in the firm. And no, apparently not. Apparently I can. But I was there too. I would have had that exact same reaction had someone not come to me and talked to me about it. And without that, I wouldn't have known that was the opportunity was there, that it was even open to me.
Amazing. And Bibi, what was your number one piece of advice for a firm looking to increase the number of women in leadership? What would you?
I think we've talked about sort of what the organisation can do in terms of the environment and, you know, processes, policies. What a client always said to me, that one thing that she really wants to mandate, and I think this echoes what Simona and Suzannah have said, is, you know, pay it forward. If you've gone through, you've achieved, then pay that forward, offer yourself out to develop, identify other people within the organisation, outside of the organisation, to help them with their leadership journey. And that's just how you create a movement, you know, because if we all did it and we all became that one person, it's just like, great, it's not going to create that movement. And that's what we want. We want this to be a movement where change is actually enacted, and change will only come about is if we take action. So yeah, so I can only say thank you to Suzannah and Simona for paying it forward, because I know that they do and how they do that. So it's great in itself there.
A question that we've had is, in your personal journey, you've all been successful in your own right. What would you say is one of the main factors that have been a key part to your journey? I'll start with Suzannah.
Oh, I was wishing you didn't, because I think I peaked too early by sharing my experience in relation to the board. No, I mean, it is that. In that case, it was having someone speak to me about it that made me even realise it was a possibility. But also, I mean, if I think about achieving partnership, which is obviously something that I always thought was accessible, because there are women in the partnership, and it's always something that I aim to do right from when I started in the firm. But what was instrumental in getting me there was having someone who could sponsor me. So someone who's already talking to the people that are going to be making the decision, saying, this person's good, you know, look out for her. And I think that it's certainly been was ultimately instrumental in the final stage to getting that step of my journey too.
And to add to that, where do you, obviously, because you are very senior in everything that you're doing right now, where do you see your progression moving forwards? What do you have any further aims?
Well, yes. I see my career, I suppose, changing in terms of the balance of what I do. So inevitably, it will become less about being a partner. I deal with construction disputes, and more about the leadership part.
Okay.
And I see it's further movement in that direction.
Wow. And Bibi, what would you say has been a key part to your journey into being successful?
I see my journey of two parts: my corporate life, and then my life as a coach, having set up my own business, and working with some really fantastic people. The juxtaposition between the two happened actually because of a setback. You know, I came to the UAE. I was head of HR at Clifford Chance, and actually I was supposed to go back. It was 2 years to come. I was supposed to go back to the UK. Didn't want to, so actually I got made redundant here. And it was at that point that it allowed me to actually, rather than be on that continuous treadmill of, okay, so I've been, you know, recruitment, HR, talent, etc. It was now around, so what do I actually want to do? So I looked at what I enjoyed, what I loved, and actually took self-belief in my ability to able to you know, retrain, set up a coaching business, and go from there. So in a way, it was it surprises me now that I say that, actually, because I've not really thought about it before. But I guess it was my belief in being able to try something different.
I love that story. And the fact that you've just gone out there and gone, I can do this and I'm going to do this, and you've set something up, and it's taking that risk, isn't it? That leap of faith, which is amazing.
And if you knew me better, Zahra, you'd know that I was completely risk averse. So yeah, it's surprising me as I say it now.
It's inspirational. I love it. And Simona, what's been a key part to your successful journey?
I think I'll just follow on from what Bibi, or the way the conversation went. I think that for me, the big changes happened when I was willing to take risks and put myself out there and take on a role that I didn't necessarily feel 100% confident that I was made for. I really think that that's something that I see in a lot of women that I coach, is that risk averse nature, or I don't know if it's risk averse or it's a lack of confidence or whatever it is, but it is actually putting yourself out there and trying things out. And I believe that that's one of the fundamental things. I think the other one is being clear yourself, or being clear to your own values, and being able to communicate those clearly. So I was very clear all along what I was willing to compromise on and what I wasn't willing to compromise on. And I think that I was once told by one of my mentors, like, if you aren't able to articulate what you want, how do you expect the organization to know what you need? They're not mind readers. So, it takes a type of character to be able to say what you want. And you have to also be willing to accept that you might not get what you want, and that there will be consequences of that. But I think being able to articulate clearly in your own mind what you want, what you need, and being able to have a conversation that's clear about that is another way that actually enables a company to get more information, see whether there's a way to address that need. Whether it's on a new project, it's more exposure, it's a stretch role, it's a flexible working relationship. There are things that if you can articulate them, that helps.
Suzannah, what one bit of advice would you give someone who is looking to push themselves into the next leadership position, take a step up from where they are now? What advice would you give for someone at that stage?
I think that there'll probably be two things. The first is take every opportunity, because so many things sort of come along and are happening around you. But taking each one of those is almost like an incremental step to getting somewhere, well, certainly getting somewhere different, but getting somewhere higher. So I would say take every opportunity. And the second thing I would say is get to know people and invest that time. So, don't shy away from speaking to the people that are in the positions that you want to be in ultimately. Get to know them.
That's good advice.
Get to know you.
Yeah, that's really good advice, actually. And Bibi? So obviously, I know you obviously made your jump because you got made redundant, but if someone's in the sort of a similar situation to yourself, or is looking to step up to a leadership position from where they're currently at, what advice would you give? Because I know there's a lot of conversations that I have, people are always nervous, what if it doesn't work out? Where can I go? So what would you, I think it's a key turning point.
I think it is, I think you're right there. It's your mindset, flip the negative into the positive, rather than, supposing it doesn't work out. Oh my God, supposing it does, and actually start there. Start with listening to how you actually talk yourself in or out of something, before you even think about, okay, well, I now am clear. So what Simona said, clear on what you want, and then I can go and talk to somebody about it, which is what Suzannah said. So yeah, just taking that one step deeper, I guess, and actually listening to yourself.
And Simona, would you have anything to add on those points?
No, I think Suzannah's point about speaking to the people whose roles that you are contemplating, or even if you're not contemplating them now in the immediate future, but in the future, I think most people are willing to spend a 15-minute or a 20-minute coffee with someone who can come with a clear reason as to why they want to have that meeting, and that you can learn a lot from them about the role, what it entails, and so on. I've never turned down a reasonable request for a meeting ever, and I don't think most people would.
Okay. Wow, that wraps up our webinar today. So I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us. I want to thank you for participating, Bibi, Simona and Suzannah. I'm very grateful for your time today. If we do have any further questions, again, if you are to email them in to tiger@tigerrecruitment.co.uk, and we will pass it on to the speakers to answer your questions. So I'd just like to thank you all for joining me today in this call, and I will get back to you if we have any further questions.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.